soldiers in 18th century uniforms marching through smoke. Civil War cannons firing, tanks rolling across Europe in World War II, helicopters rising over Vietnam, and finally modern soldiers equipped with night vision gear and drones. Over these clips, your narration begins with a dramatic tone. The United States Army didn't begin as a global powerhouse. It started as a small group of volunteer fighters, farmers, blacksmiths, and ordinary colonists standing up against the strongest empire in the world. Today, it's one of the most advanced and influential military forces on the planet. Let a short pause follow before adding a question that hooks curiosity. But how did this transformation happen? How did a collection of citizen soldiers grow into an army that reshaped global history? The goal here is to make the viewer feel the weight of the story before it even begins. Your intro transitions smoothly from this dramatic hook by grounding the viewer in what they're about to see. You explain that this video will take them on a journey through nearly 2.5 centuries of conflict, innovation, and evolution. You describe how you'll explore the Army's birth during the American Revolution, its struggles to survive as a new nation, its massive expansions during the World Wars, and the technological revolutions that turned it into a modern force. Make the viewer feel like they're stepping into a timeline where every era reshaped the nation itself. You can say something like, in the next 20 minutes, we'll trace the major turning points that defined the U.S. Army, how its mission changed, how its technology advanced, and how its soldiers adapted to new forms of warfare. From the forests of the 1770s to the deserts of the Middle East, this is the story of an army that not only fought battles, but shaped the direction of world events. End the intro by setting the expectation for a clear, structured journey, inviting the viewer to stay with you. So let's step back in time and see how the United States Army became the force we know today. Chapter 1: Origins of the U.S. Army 1775 to 1783. In 1775, the American colonies found themselves standing on the edge of a revolution they could no longer avoid. Tensions with the British Empire had reached a breaking point, and the scattered militias of the colonies were no longer enough to protect the movement for independence. That's when the Continental Congress made a decision that would change history: the creation of the Continental Army on June 14, 1775. This was the moment the United States Army was born. George Washington, already respected for his leadership and strategic mind, was chosen to command this untested force, but he didn't inherit a polished army. He inherited farmers with rifles, volunteers with minimal training, and shortages of almost everything. They lacked uniforms, equipment, and sometimes even food. But what they didn't lack was determination. Over the next 8 years, the Continental Army faced brutal winters, long marches, and overwhelming odds. Victories like Trenton, Saratoga, and eventually Yorktown proved that this young army had the spirit to defeat a global superpower. The revolution didn't just create a nation, it created the foundation of a fighting force built on resilience, sacrifice, and an unwavering desire for freedom. That foundation would guide the army for centuries. Chapter 2: Early Growth and the War of 1812. After the Revolution, the young United States faced a difficult question. Should it maintain a standing army or dissolve it and rely on militia's distrust of large armies was strong, and for a time the military shrank dramatically. But the country soon learned that threats didn't disappear just because the war ended. Conflicts on the frontier, tensions with European powers, and the need to protect the expanding territory made it clear that a permanent, professional army was necessary. The establishment of West Point in 1802 marked a critical step toward creating well-trained officers who understood engineering, strategy, and leadership. By the time the War of 1812 erupted, the army was still far from large or powerful, but it had begun to take shape. The conflict tested the nation again as British forces burned Washington, D.C., and American troops struggled with limited resources. Yet the army also demonstrated its growing capability, defending key forts and fighting important battles like New Orleans. The war ended in a stalemate, but it created a new sense of national pride and highlighted the need for a stronger, more organized military. The army entered the 19th century with lessons learned and a clearer vision of its role. Chapter 3: The American Civil War, 1861–1865. The Civil War was unlike anything the United States had ever faced, and the army was at the center of its most devastating chapter. What began as political tension between North and South quickly escalated into full-scale war in 1861. The U.S. Army split as Southern officers resigned to join the Confederacy, and the Union rushed to build a massive force. By the end of the war, millions of soldiers had served far more than in any previous conflict. The Civil War transformed warfare itself. Railroads allowed armies to move faster, telegraphs enabled instant communication, and ironclad ships changed naval battles forever. The army learned to manage huge numbers of troops, supply long campaigns, and command coordinated assaults across multiple states. The battles were brutal. Antietam, Gettysburg, Shiloh, and countless others left the nation scarred. Yet the Army's ultimate success preserved the Union and ended slavery, reshaping the country's future. Out of the destruction came a more modern and professional fighting force. The Civil War pushed the Army to adopt new technologies, new training methods, and new strategies that would echo into the next century. It was a turning point that defined both the nation and the institution that protected it. Chapter 4: Expansion and Overseas Conflicts. Late 1800s, after the Civil War, the United States surged westward, and the Army played a major role in the expansion. Soldiers built forts, protected settlers, and engaged in decades of conflict with Native American tribes, many of whom resisted the loss of their lands. These battles are among the most controversial in U.S. history, but they shaped the Army's role on the frontier and tested its mobility and tactics across vast terrain. By the late 1800s, the nation turned its attention overseas. The Spanish-American War in 1898 marked the United States' arrival as a global power in battles across Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. The Army demonstrated growing strength but also faced new challenges like tropical diseases and unfamiliar landscapes. This war also revealed weaknesses in organization and logistics, prompting sweeping reforms. Better medical care, more professional training, and improved supply systems emerged from this era. The Army began modernizing with new rifles, better artillery, and more structured units. For the first time, the U.S. saw itself not just as a continental nation, but as a country with a global military presence. The stage was set for the far larger conflicts of the 20th century. Chapter 5, World War I, 1917 to 1918. When World War I erupted in Europe, the U.S. initially stayed out of the fighting, but by 1917, rising tensions and global instability pushed the nation to join the Allies. The Army faced a tremendous challenge, transforming from a relatively small force into a massive, modern fighting machine in a matter of months. Millions of Americans were drafted, trained, and shipped to Europe. The war exposed soldiers to trench warfare, machine guns, artillery barrages, and poison gas threats that required new tactics and rapid adaptation. The Army also introduced tanks and aircraft, marking the beginning of mechanized warfare. Despite limited experience with such large-scale operations, U.S. forces played a decisive role in key battles like Cantigny, Belleau Wood, and the Meuse-Argonne offensive. These victories boosted Allied morale and helped bring the war to an end. After the conflict, the Army reduced in size again, but the experience had permanently changed it. The war proved the importance of modern weapons, strong leadership, and rapid mobilization. It also laid the groundwork for the Army Air Service, which would eventually evolve into the U.S. Air Force. World War I was brief for the United States, but its impact on the Army was enormous. Chapter 6, World War II, 1941 to 1945. World War II required the largest military buildup in American history. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the nation mobilized with unprecedented speed and determination. The Army expanded into the millions, building new divisions, training camps, and support systems almost overnight. Soldiers fought across Europe, Africa, and the Pacific in a truly global conflict. The Army became more technologically advanced than ever before. It deployed tanks, advanced artillery, paratroopers, and highly trained special forces. In the Pacific, soldiers battled through jungles and islands in grueling campaigns, while in Europe they helped liberate nations under Nazi control. The D-Day invasion, one of the most complex operations ever attempted, showcased the Army's coordination and courage. By 1945, the United States emerged as one of the world's most Powerful nations, and the army played a central role in that transformation. After the war, the army didn't simply shrink back to its pre-war size. It became a major permanent force, committed to global stability and future defense. World War II changed the army forever, pushing it into a new era of global leadership and technological dominance that continues to shape its identity today. Chapter 7: The Cold War Era, 1947 to 1991, the end of World War II. Didn't he bring lasting peace? Instead, it opened a new era of rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. The army adapted to a world defined by nuclear weapons, ideological conflict, and rapid scientific advancement. As a founding member of NATO, the U.S. Army stationed troops across Europe to deter Soviet expansion. In Korea, the army fought a brutal war in freezing mountains and rugged terrain, proving that large-scale conflict was still possible even in the shadow of nuclear weapons. In Vietnam, soldiers faced a different kind of war, one fought in dense jungles against guerrilla forces. Helicopters became essential tools, changing how troops moved and fought. While the conflict was controversial at home, it gave the army valuable lessons in strategy, mobility, and counterinsurgency. Throughout the Cold War, the army modernized constantly. New tanks, guided missiles, night vision equipment, and computer-based systems reshaped its capabilities. Training improved, special operations grew, and rapid response units were developed for emergencies around the world. By the time the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the army had evolved into a technologically sophisticated force prepared for both traditional and unconventional threats. Chapter 8: Modern Era. 1991 present, the modern era began with the Gulf War, where the U.S. Army shocked the world with precision weapons, satellite guidance, and overwhelming speed. The conflict demonstrated how far technology had command, how the army had mastered modern combined arms warfare. After the September 11th attacks, the army entered a new chapter focused on counterterrorism, nation-building, and long-term deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. Soldiers operated in deserts, mountains, and cities, while working with allies and local forces. The rise of drones, digital communication, and intelligence systems transformed how missions were planned and executed. Special forces and elite units took on greater responsibilities, often conducting operations with speed and precision. Today, the army continues evolving to face new challenges like cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, and near-peer competition. Modern programs are developing advanced vehicles, robotic support units, and improved soldier gear designed for the conflicts of the future. The army also engages in peacekeeping, disaster relief, and humanitarian missions around the world, emphasizing its role beyond combat. From its beginnings as a small group of volunteers to a high-tech global force, the modern U.S. Army reflects centuries of adaptation, strategy, and sacrifice, and its story is still unfolding. The Army's story is the story of America built on resilience, innovation, and the determination to protect freedom. From a handful of revolutionaries to a global force for stability. The U.S. Army has marched through centuries of challenge and change, and its story continues, written every day by those who choose to serve.